Greetings to all Formula One fans and motorsport enthusiasts in general. Formula One cars have become absolutely huge. Since the late 2000s, they have grown and grown. They have grown so much that they have become longer and wider than modern pickup trucks, and this cannot lead to anything good. Although they are the fastest cars on the lap, they are nowhere near the sharpness and agility of the cars from the 2000s. Let's figure out how they became so big and whether there is any hope for change. The fastest racing car and lap time is much less than ever. From the outside, the speed is absolutely amazing. But from the camera on the car, everything looks so grounded that it doesn't look like they are going faster than even GT3 cars. If you look back just 10 years, maybe a little more, you will see that the cars seem to be driving on the edge, and the drivers were literally fighting them in every corner. And it looked incredibly exciting. Large cars also complicate overtaking. Firstly, a wider car takes up most of the track, which makes defense easier. Remember how ridiculous modern cars look at the same Imola, where it seemed battles were boiling side by side before. I won't even mention Monaco. If we really exaggerate, look at MotoGP. They have to defend by being faster because they cannot simply block most of the track with themselves, which leads to a large number of overtakes. While in current Formula One on the Monaco track, there are very few places where you could simply fit two cars side by side. But let's not just resort to the phrase, "it was better before." Let's look into this topic. First, the width of cars has changed over the years in one direction or another, but since 1997, the width was reduced to 1.8 meters from 2. And this was part of a complex of rules that were aimed at slowing down cars in the interests of safety, and it worked. The cars were significantly slowed down for several reasons. Firstly, a narrower car means a narrower chassis with less space. So many components must be installed higher. And as a rule, this raises the center of gravity. Secondly, this brings the tires closer to the car, and consequently, the tires bring dirty air to the car's aerodynamic elements, reducing downforce, especially at the rear. This also led to changes in car length, and not because it was prescribed by the rules. In fact, there were rarely restrictions on the overall length of the car because in any case, there is a balance that must be achieved between the width and length of the car. Therefore, cars became shorter to provide better balance in corners, and a side effect of people becoming so small was that they were very light, about 600 kilograms, which in turn meant they were very maneuverable. And thanks to relatively stiff suspension, they looked much livelier than modern ones. But the biggest difference between today's cars and cars from the 90s is length. Cars have become a meter longer, and if you look at the graph of car length growth, it grows at insane rates since 2017. We'll return to the details a little later, and looking at this, it's impossible not to wonder why cars have become so long. And as it turns out, the answer is quite simple. Although the regulations do not directly control car length, there are rules for maximum overhang both front and rear, and using this rule to the maximum allows them to create large wings that are farther from the wheels, increasing the effect of downforce on road grip. At the same time, the wheelbase is actually free. Teams can choose it, and it really varies between teams. The Mercedes car is the longest, and Red Bull has the shortest wheelbase. Their difference is 30 centimeters. But even today's Red Bull is much longer than cars from the early 2000s. And this is mainly due to turbo hybrid engines that were introduced in 2014. They come with much more baggage than before, with elements such as battery, energy recovery system, electric motor, and so on. All this needs to be placed somewhere in the car. Trying to fit all this in a car from the 2000s would simply be impossible. And also, the current car needs to carry fuel for the entire race distance, as refueling was banned in 2010. To fit so much fuel, 110 kilograms, teams also had to lengthen the cars. There are other things too, like the halo was increased for safety reasons. And they also added much more telemetry sensors and cameras that take up space and weight. And you have to understand that some of this is really necessary things. But the most interesting thing is that this does not explain why the wheelbase differs between different teams. Mercedes uses the longest wheelbase for aerodynamic reasons. The longer the wheelbase, the larger the dynamic surface, which is especially important for the floor, because there it has a huge effect. And also this means they can use less rake, which means the rear of the car is not located so high, which creates less drag, and also this lowers the car's center of gravity. With more space, it's easier to arrange car elements, which allows placing components lower, improving the car's efficiency in high-speed corners. But not everything is so perfect. The longer the wheelbase, the less maneuverable the car. That's exactly why Red Bull is usually faster than Mercedes in slow corners. A shorter wheelbase and higher rake allows the car to take corners better, especially slow ones. And the cars remained narrow until 2017. Wider cars with high downforce from 2017 to 2021 became monsters, the fastest F1 cars in all history. But they not only completely failed to solve the problems they were originally supposed to solve, but in many ways worsened the situation. Despite this, they still remain the most outstanding creations of F1 engineers. And the 5 years during which these monsters plowed tracks around the world will be remembered more for interesting engineering solutions than spectacular battles. Although at the end there was quite an interesting bonus season. The ongoing problem of creating not only fast but also race-worthy cars manifested itself in creating the 2017 regulations. The result was faster cars with more downforce that differed dramatically from the previous generation that raced from 2014 to 2016. Car width was increased from 1.8 meters to 2 meters, and minimum weight rose to 728 kilograms. For additional grip, front wheels were made 6 centimeters wider and rear ones 8. The rear wing was made 20 centimeters wider and 15 centimeters lower. The rear diffuser was increased by 5 centimeters in width and height and also became 17.5 centimeters longer. The front wing increased by 15 centimeters, equalizing in width with cars of the previous generation, 1.8 meters, which led to a significant increase in downforce. All this led to a significant reduction in lap time. The initial goal set by F1 in May 2015 was for 2017 cars to be 5 or 6 seconds faster per lap. But it should be taken into account that at that time it was planned to return refueling. But soon they abandoned this idea as a result of teams presenting data demonstrating that refueling would rather worsen race quality than improve it. Since everyone would simply find the ideal combination of fuel consumption that would allow pouring as little as possible and driving economically. If you compare fast laps of cars from 2015 and 2017, on average lap time decreased by 4.2 seconds. But this was only the start for this generation of cars. While teams continuously worked on improving performance, in 2018 several rule changes occurred. The halo protection system was added, initially a controversial measure. And one of the system's critics was Romain Grosjean. But later, it saved his life at the Bahrain Grand Prix in 2020. For the first time, this system proved itself by protecting Leclerc from Fernando Alonso landing on him. In addition to this, so-called shark fins and T-wings were also banned, and minimum weight increased to 734 kilograms. In 2019, there were further changes from the insane front wing of 2018. Just look at what it was. Now the front wing became 20 centimeters wider and reached a span of 2 meters. And also became 2 centimeters higher and 2.5 centimeters longer. The number of wing elements was also limited to 5, which meant much simpler profiles. And also a maximum of 2 flaps on each side of the wing were allowed in order to reduce the amount of turbulent air created by the front wing for cars behind. End plates were also simplified. The rear wing was made 10 centimeters wider and end plates simplified. Side pods were made 10 centimeters longer horizontally, but 15 centimeters lower in height. We'll return to the reasons for these changes. All these changes kept cars from new track records. The rules did not change in 2020, which was supposed to be the final season of this era of cars. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, these same cars with virtually no changes were extended to 2021 as well. However, in 2021, a controversial set of 4 aerodynamic modifications was introduced, including a triangular cutout in the rear of the floor, elimination of various aerodynamic cutouts and ribs at the rear of the floor, reduction of diffuser dividers and also winglets in the lower part of rear brake ducts. This was done to reduce overall downforce, which was supposed to prevent excessive load on Pirelli tires, which were extended for a 3rd season in 2021. Minimum weight also increased to an impressive 752 kilograms. As a result of all this, it was the 2020 cars that became the fastest, not only among this generation, but in all Formula One history. On all 28 tracks used over these several seasons, record lap times were set in F1 cars. We've figured out how fast this generation of cars was. However, they did not cope with other tasks. Concerns about the difficulty of overtaking without DRS help, worsening race quality, predictability of results were part of the discussion when discussing the rules. But ultimately, the call for faster cars with more downforce became overwhelming. This happened partly because of fan feedback and also because of driver criticism of the unpopular 2014-2016 cars, which in their opinion were not fast enough and not demanding enough for drivers. Then McLaren driver Fernando Alonso was among the critics, stating at one stage that these F1 cars have insufficient speed and grip and feel more like a GT3 class car. And although the regulations achieved their task of reducing lap time, they did little to solve fundamental problems, making chasing the leading car even more difficult due to increased dirty air volume. In particular, the fact that the rear wing was lower combined with an overly complex front wing made turbulent air an even bigger problem, which led to the aforementioned 2019 changes. They were based on research conducted by F1 and FIA for the 2022 regulations, selecting several key areas in an attempt to make short-term changes for the better. This relatively little affected how difficult it was to drive with another car. But it is believed that at least this prevented worsening of problems during the last 3 years of this regulation. And looking at the spectacular races we saw in 2021, overtaking still depended too much on DRS use. Drivers still had difficulty chasing opponents, and for this they didn't even need to be too close. The dirty air problem was felt even at a distance of 3 seconds from the leading car. As a result, the cars were great on a qualifying lap, but this did little for race quality. That's why Ross Brawn calls improving race quality a key goal of the 2022 regulations. These cars were a mistake, but that doesn't mean they weren't memorable. Although they were bigger and heavier than the nimble V10 engine cars from the early 2000s, consequently a bit lazy in corners, they were still surprisingly fast. But hardly a race or qualifying session passed without drivers complaining about how difficult it was to follow another car or overtake. Not to mention problems caused by temperature-sensitive Pirelli tires that didn't allow driving at full speed for the entire distance, and sometimes not even one qualifying lap. Despite all this, they were impressive. I wouldn't be surprised if drivers missed them. Of course, whether they will miss them will depend on the big question of how fast or slow 2022 cars will be compared to the previous generation. They are heavier, aerodynamically simplified with much stricter regulations, which means the lap time deficit will be large. But serious assumptions have appeared that the gap may be quite insignificant. Cars will have less downforce in slow corners, but potentially more in fast ones thanks to aero tunnels with ground effect. You can watch another video on my channel about this and learn how ground effect works on new cars. Fathers in Formula One believe the question is when, not whether new cars can reach the level of their predecessors. And I think over time they will even eclipse the fastest cars in history, the 2020 cars. F1 cars from 2017 to 2021 will be remembered by fans and drivers as the fastest cars ever to race. Write in the comments what you remember about this generation of cars. For me personally, it was mostly remembered for the impossibility of overtaking, DRS trains, and insane aerodynamic structures. I will never forget how at the 2019 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Championship leaders on fresh tires without DRS, which was disabled due to detection system failure on the track. Could not overtake Valtteri Bottas on old tires and drove behind him in a train. And of course, the insane 2021 season. It's time to say goodbye to them. In general, it follows from all this that cars have become longer, wider, and heavier, because the rules push them in this direction, and I think this is a complete failure on the part of Formula One management. Write in the comments what you think about this. But the main question is whether they can fix this. From all this, it is clear that we cannot simply magically reduce the car while maintaining all the additional safety, hybrid, and everything else. However, this made me think about the fact that hypercar or similar seems to cope with this. There is IndyCar, and Formula One's Junior Series does fine with smaller sizes, so I'm sure that with rules forcing the transition to more compact cars, teams would cope with this task. And here's the most interesting thing. Formula One rules for 2022 prescribe a maximum overall length of 5.63 meters and a maximum wheelbase of 3 meters. This is only 100 millimeters less than the length of current Mercedes and actually not less than current Ferrari. But this is a step in the right direction, and it must be said that these new 2022 rules look really exciting, promising smaller cars, simpler aerodynamics, and much more fighting. And a big part of this is the new fancy rear wing and simpler front wing, which we will talk about in future videos. And I recommend you additionally watch a video about why cars have become so heavy. If you liked the video, I remind you to like and subscribe so you don't miss interesting videos. And also now you can support the channel financially and arrange sponsorship on my channel, or just donate via the link in the description. I will be very grateful. Unger donated 33 rubles and wrote, "I hope with the new concept a weak team will break into the leaders. But Max will become champion again and George will give Lewis a fight. I really hope McLaren and Ferrari will challenge them, and maybe Alpine. But I also really believe in George. Thanks for the support." Vladimir donated 500 rubles and wrote, "From the heart for another useful video. Thank you very much. Very glad you liked the video. I try to collect really interesting and useful information. Huge thanks." He donated 300 rubles and wrote, "Excellent content. Everything is accessible and understandable. It's clear the channel is developing and progressing. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Glad you like it. I'm trying to explain more accessibly than I did before. Very glad about the development and progress. Without your support, this wouldn't be possible. I want to thank the channel sponsors. Nakabe arranged sponsorship for the second month in a row. Big thanks. Eugene arranged sponsorship on the channel for the first time. Big thanks. Diablo and Milman arranged sponsorship on the channel for the first time. Big thanks. I thank all channel sponsors who subscribed earlier and also donated earlier. Once again, big thanks to everyone for the support. Good luck and pleasant off-season. Don't forget to check the channel, it will be interesting.